to the Membership IQ. I'm Sarah Sladek, your host. Are you a millennial? If you are a millennial, you might have just thought to yourself, yes, but I'm not going to admit it. And if you're not a millennial, you might have thought to yourself, no, and thank goodness I'm not. Why the reaction to the word millennial? Well, when millennials came of age, they were born 1982 to 1995. And when they came of age, they came of age during a time of incredible technological advancements. And they were the largest generation in history, even larger than the baby boomer generation. And this just ushered in all kinds of change. In fact, we could really say millennials are the personification of change. We've coined the phrase millennials here in the United States, but internationally they're known as Generation Y. And with such a very large generation influencing all kinds of broad scale change, they became the most studied generation in history and also the most criticized generation. We've never been very good as a society at engaging the next generation and welcoming their ideas. There's always a little bit of resistance. There's always criticism about the youngest generation. It's a kids these days attitude. Kids these days don't want to join associations. They're not loyal. They're difficult to reach. They're lazy. They're entitled, and on and on and on. And this reached really acute levels when millennials began to come of age. And again, it's because they truly were the personification of change in so many ways. I am not a millennial. However, I've experienced age discrimination. And we study age discrimination in our firm, and we actually hear from a lot of people. The age discrimination is alive and well. It is thriving, unfortunately. In fact, new research just came out of New York University, which says that workplace discrimination and age discrimination against young people is at an all-time high. Workplace hostility is at an all-time high. Even during pandemic and increased awareness of racial and social injustices, we're fixated on really being hostile towards young people. And this is actually contributing to turnover, and it actually contributes to membership decline. A few years ago, I had a call with someone who happened to be a baby boomer, and he made a really snarky comment towards me, not ever meeting me before or knowing anything about me. And he said, it's really nice to talk to you, and thank goodness I'm not talking to a Gen Xer, because I can't stand Gen Xers. Xers being born in 1965 to 1981. Little did he know that I am a proud Gen Xer. Okay, I love the Gen X mentality. I definitely embody the whole independence and the self-sufficiency and a little bit of that rebellious attitude. But the fact that he said that to me without any pretext, without knowing me at all, and he said it in such a snide and snarky way. Do you know age discrimination is the last accepted form of discrimination in our culture? We speak out about gender discrimination and racial discrimination, but we're lagging behind, woefully behind, in terms of age discrimination. Why is that important to know with membership? Well, how do you build a team? How do you build a community when any population feels discriminated against? And you might be saying to yourself, well, we don't discriminate against millennials. But I want you to take a really good look around and ask yourselves, how many young people are in leadership? Are we actively reaching out and inviting young people to participate? Do they truly have a voice at the table? Are we really, really open and engaging to new people with new ideas? Or are we labeling? Are we excluding? Are we downright hostile? And if it's not happening in your association, think about whether it's happening in your member companies and in their workplaces. Because again, all the research that we do in our firm, and we've done this for 20 years, every single audience, every single survey, we repeatedly see that generation gaps and workplace hostility and hostility within associations is unfortunately alive and well. And this is going to impact your ability to engage young people. Obviously, it's so obvious when I say that, right? It's so basic. And yet I feel that I have to say it because it's a reoccurring issue. It's a big, big problem. And it's a huge hurdle to growth. So I asked you, are you a millennial? And maybe you thought to yourself, well, no, I'm not a millennial. I'm not that young. Or maybe you are a millennial, but you struggle to admit that you're a millennial because you're kind of embarrassed because millennials are so incredibly criticized. Well, here's news for you. We're all millennials now. Regardless of our age, we are all millennials now, thanks to pandemic. Because during pandemic, we were forced, many of our organizations and leaders were quite vehemently forced into this new reality, this new norm of a world driven entirely by technology. And if you are a millennial, if you have been raised since 1982, which 1982 is the beginning of the millennial generation because it is the year that the home computer went mainstream. And that changed everything. For the children born after that year, they had a totally different mindset and skill set and view of the world. If you've never known life without technology, you've never known life without globalization and being able to network with people all over the world. You've never known life without instant gratification and on-demand abilities, again, to communicate, connect, purchase goods and services. Everything is literally at your fingertips, and it moves so fast. And if you've never known life without technology, you've always known this concept of migration, meaning things are moving quickly and constantly changing, and society is constantly evolving. So we're all millennials now, whether you like it or not, because of pandemic. You had to live in that millennial mindset of being adaptive, of being innovative, of thinking about how to communicate on demand, of ordering groceries and online and Zoom all day, every day. Technology. And you began to realize, and some of your associations began to realize, either, yep, we are definitely aligned with the way the world is going, and this was no hurdle whatsoever, or your organization was thinking to itself, man, we are behind. We didn't even know what Zoom was before all of this, even though Zoom's been around since 2011 or 9 or something like that. The technology's been there, but we weren't using it. We weren't thinking about hybrid conferences or streaming or our education, our programs. We weren't being on demand. We weren't being instantaneous. We were behind the curve big time. As Steve Jobs put it, you are either a generation ahead or a generation behind. And every single day, you are deciding which it's going to be. Your organization is getting up and making that critical decision. We're either ahead or we're behind. We're either criticizing young people or we're engaging them. We're either being future focused or we're holding on to the past Generation ahead or generation behind. There is no in between. If you're a generation ahead, you're not only a millennial right now, you're actually becoming a Gen Z. A Gen Z, yes. Gen Zs are the current 20-somethings and teens in our workplaces and our associations. And that might seem really young to be thinking like a teen, but this is where trickle up effect happens, because every major social change and trend has always started with the youngest generation, and it eventually trickles up and influences the masses. Rock and roll, Harley Davidson, Facebook, selfies. These are all major social changes that began with the youngest generation. Like it or not, they trickled up and influenced the masses, including associations. So as the associations that were a generation behind are always struggling to catch up and understand the terminology and the trends. And there's always a scramble happening. Whereas the associations that are ahead of the curve and thinking a generation ahead, they're ready. They're positioned for success no matter who or what's coming next, and no matter how long that trickle up effect takes effect. So if we're thinking like a Gen Z, we are recognizing that associations and businesses are being held accountable in a way like they never have. Gen Z is like millennials in that they've had access to information at their fingertips, actually from the time they were small children. They've always had mobile, wireless technology. And so that changes how they think about the world, how they interact with the world. In fact, there is research now to prove that their brains have developed differently than any other generation. They are a highly visual, hands-on learning generation. That means the way we teach people, train people, engage our members, communicate in the future, it's going to have to be more visual, and it will have to be more instantaneous. But it also means that if you have all this access to information, literally at your fingertips, round the clock, 24/7, from the time you're very young, you're very well informed and educated about the world and what's going on in the world. And you feel empowered to make a difference. And you are holding your organizations accountable to drive meaningful change. Future generations are going to ask your association, where do you stand? What do you stand for? And how are you making this world a better place for my generation and the generations to come? That's what Gen Z is going to be asking. So, are you a millennial? Well, you might not realize it yet, but you should be thinking that way. In fact, you should be thinking about Gen Z. Because again, you're either a generation ahead or a generation behind. And I would urge you to be very focused on the future and who and what is coming next. Because ready or not, here it comes. I'm Sarah Sladek. Thank you for tuning in to the Membership IQ.